melt is when I'm ocean waves.
Today on Virginia Legends podcast, I have legendary UVA guard Anthony Solomon, who we called Slow, who's been coaching at the Division I level for many years now. I have 34, 35 years, coach.
That is correct. Just completed 35.
Oh my God, yeah. So he's going to join us to talk about his journey. Thanks for doing this, Slow.
Great to be here with you, Julian. You've done a great job with your podcast. I've kept up with it periodically, and I'm much enthused to be a part of what you call a Legends series. But I'll try to fit in there somewhere.
well, you are a legend, and it's funny because you were a legend at a very young age. I remember when you're from the Peninsula area of Virginia. Some people call it Tidewater area, but Hampton, Newport News area. And I remember when you got to college, you always carried yourself very professionally, even as a very young guy. I remember, we used to play a lot of pickup basketball together, and I know you're on the UVA team. Anytime you were in the gym, you were 100%. You took everything very seriously. I remember you used to walk around classes. You always had a briefcase. I used to be like, where's the guy going with his briefcase? I believe Tracy, your wife was at UVA with us. I remember you guys were together. You always seemed you were well beyond your years, even at a very young age.
I appreciate that, Julie. Yes, Tracy's an 87, Wahoo as well. No, it started at a young age. Growing up on the Peninsula back in the 80s. A big part of it was playing sports, and sports was a big part of my life. My parents were not very sports oriented, but I had some older brothers. I'm one of 8 kids in the family. I was the 5th child, baby boy, as they called me, and was the first one to leave home and to go to college. And when I left to go to UVA, it was a great moment for our family. My dad was very excited. He thought that I was doing something that could start a new twist in terms of the generation of our family. And I always remembered him talking when they dropped me off in the summer, because at that time we started summer school and
summer prep. Summer prep.
That was it. That's right. Summer prep. That's right. And it was important that I went there and, as he would say, represent our name, Solomon. And I took that very seriously and approached each day as if it was the last day. But great 4 years at UVA, a lot of great memories and experiences that have really prepared me for what I've begun to do or have done for over 3 decades now.
Yeah. Well, in the Peninsula area, I thought of it at that time as a football area. They were known for great football teams. Hampton, Bethel, all those teams were great, phenomenal. You guys had, and I talked to Jason Wallace about this, played at UVA as well. You guys had great youth programs. Basketball you guys didn't start making more national basketball name until a few years afterward. Allen Iverson, Hampton won a whole bunch of state championships. Hampton won a couple, Bethel won one. And then, we talked about offline how Boo Williams' program helped propel the area. Was it more of a football area to you when you were coming up?
Well, I would agree with that, Julian. I would say, I had older brothers that graduated in the late 70s, early 80s. And I remember I was the young one, but back in the 70s, they would go to high school games. And I always remember them going to high school football games. And then you had the Hampton Crabers. Yeah. And they were consistently good and one of the best in the state. But in the early 80s, Boo Williams came about, which at that time, we considered it was the Boo Williams Summer League, BWSL. And the summer of 82 was the summer before my senior year of high school. And what Boo did, I thought he really extended and stretched that area for more than just football, but certainly it's a talented area overall. I mean, you think about the Upton brothers. They both went one in their respective draft classes into the MLB. But Boo started that summer league, and we played for like 6 Saturdays. And you played 2 games. There was like 6 teams. There were 2 games each Saturday. And at the end of that summer league season, we played an all-star game. And it was at Hampton Institute at that time. And we played against the Philadelphia, it was the Sunny League All-Stars out of Philly. Yeah. And they came to Hampton and they taught us some lessons, okay? But it was a great experience. You know, not many know that. I look back on it now and it means a lot to me that I was actually Boo Williams' first MVP. I was the player of the year in '84 in the Boo Williams Summer League. And, you know, no NBA there at all. However, it's something that I've carried with me, to be honest with you, Julian, in terms of what the game of basketball did for me and my family. It opened doors, it created opportunities. And we give credit to Boo for starting that. And that ball stops bouncing. And when that ball stops bouncing, what else will you do with your life and for your family? And that experience with what Boo did, it certainly gave recognition. And now the Boo Williams Summer League, the Boo Williams AAU program / Summer League has really taken off, as we all know, and is very well nationally known. Boo is one of the trailblazers of it all in terms of what AAU is about and what the mission was for it to be about. And it's something that I'm very appreciative of and very great to be associated with it.
You remember that slow when we were at UVA? I used to referee AAU, so we'd be at U Hall. You'd be at practice sometimes, but they have AAU tournaments, and Boo would walk in with like Brian Stith, Lonzo Mourning, Allen. I remember Allen Iverson at a young age. Guys like Aaron Monday, who we got to know at UVA. I mean, Boo would just bring in like athletes and just ballers. And back then, Richmond had a squad. They had Tony Squires and they had the Richmond Gold. Roanoke, I forgot the coach's name and brought his team up, but George Lynch, those guys come from Roanoke. I mean, we used to have battles at U-Haul, and I used to officiate those games.
When you say Roanoke, you think Curtis Staples.
That's right.
Curtis Staples.
Yes.
But no, when you say Brian Stiff, and then you get into Mourning and J.R. Reed, that's when it began to take off.
Yeah. And
that's when it became national and more about the Summer League, because the Summer League was more of us from the Peninsula. It was the Newport News and the Hampton players. I don't believe we had any Norfolk or anyone across the water that was playing in the Summer League. But I do remember that, now that you say that, because we would hear that Boo had brought a team and there was an AAU tournament on campus. I didn't know you were officiating it, but that was another level of officiating from high school to going when they brought all those players there and the level of talent that was out there on the floor. But no, it's a great area. You know, you think about it, Julian, at that time, you know, you mentioned Tony Squire. He's one of the originals as well. And dear friend, and he got it started in the 804 area. But how about this, Julian? You know, now the young people say 757, but when we were doing what we were doing, we were 804 at that time as well.
Yeah.
So what I have to teach them sometime, I say, we were 804 / now we're 757, but it's all much respect for everyone. And it was a great time doing what we were doing.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was such a 757, 804 clash because, you know, from Northern Virginia, we were dominated in high school basketball by the southern part of the state, the eastern part of the state especially. Yeah, and so we just had, it was uphill climb for us to advance in the state tournament. So we didn't even know about this rivalry. And as soon as I started doing this podcast, you know, people down there, that's all they talk about. And it's something that I didn't really know existed because I just figured, you know, they were all good down there. We didn't really identify where they were coming from. So when you were growing up playing in Hampton, who are some of your first influences? Who'd you? I remember I read some articles about you, and you scored a lot of points in high school. My only recollection of you were a defensive stopper. I remember You used to lock me down. I was a pretty fast player. I'm not on your level, but I could run. But you were a stopper when Terry Holland would put you in a game. It was a defensive purpose. So I always thought of you as a defensive guard, but I know you were a scorer in high school. So who were your first influences?
Well, we always have to change it and be flexible with our roles, right? You have to know who you're playing with.
Yeah.
But no, in high school, well, it really started in middle school. I had two great high school coaches that put a lot of interest in me in terms of getting better and improving. My high school coach was Jim Harvey, and he was a big North Carolina guy. You know, we ran all the North Carolina system from the fast break to the out of bounds plays. And then his assistant coach was Dennis Katufas. Those two really committed to helping myself as well as my teammates to be the best that we could be. And they were basketball guys. They loved basketball. And, you know, when you mentioned earlier about football, the influence and the impact football had on the area, there was a part of us at Warwick High School that, and on the Peninsula, Warwick, Ferguson, Minchfield, Denby, that was the Newport News side. But Hampton at that time, when we mentioned the Crabbers, they set the tone for football in that area as well as throughout the state. We became a little edgy because we wanted to show that we could play basketball, and we were really good. My middle school was in Newport News. It was Huntington Intermediate at that time. And then before that, it was Huntington High School. But, you know, with all the changes that took place in the school system at that time, it was a competitive area. You know, one gentleman you may be familiar with, Ricky Wilson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he played at George Mason.
Great career at George Mason. I believe he's probably in their Hall of Fame.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Rick was an 82 graduate from Phoebus High School. Mm-hmm. Rick was like a 6'4" big point guard.
Yes.
My junior year, we lost the first regular season game to Phoebus. It was at Phoebus, and that was a hard loss. And the reason I say that is because, you know, if you look back, you know, Warwick High School, we had our share of players, but coach set the tone. We had a great culture there about being great in basketball while being quality young people. I moved up to varsity as a sophomore, and I played with seniors and juniors. And Coach Harvey actually started me as a sophomore. When they left, my junior year started. And we had a couple of competitive. Phoebus with Rick was really legit. And then we had Ferguson High School, Minchfield High School that had David Pope was at Minchfield. Ferguson, I never played against Grant, but Grant was a 6'3" point guard out of Ferguson that played at Old Dominion.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I looked up to all of them. And in the summers, we had to go to different places to play rec ball or pickup. And I was the young guy trying to find a way to get on the floor and pick up. But the thing at that time was you had to be first to the gym, and you had to be able to know who's got next, who's your first shot, and you did not want to lose. And that's where the competitive nature came about. You know, as you mentioned about my role, certainly in high school, I was able to score and do some things. But when I got to college, I knew the personnel that was around me, and you have to play your role. And, you know, I look back on all of that and say, wow, now I got into this coaching profession, which is actually touched on 5 different decades. But it was a great environment. I give a lot of credit, certainly to my coaches. My teachers kept me focused where it needed to be academically. But the level of care, development as a person, as well as basketball, I felt like I had a great foundation and support system. And that last summer with Boo, that took it to another notch, as well as just believing that in that Sunny Hill game was a lesson for all of us. And it taught us that there's more out there than just on the peninsula. So you had to prepare for life outside of our little small window. and domain that we thought was it and all that it was. But it really stretched us. And all of a sudden, I come to UVA and I get to meet you, Julian. How about that?
Exactly. Well, you are there. You were there, blazing the trail before I got there. So, but so you talked about, when you're in the peninsula, that's all there is. And I've heard that from some of the athletes that there's not a lot of professional sports teams. There were the Virginia Squires were there and stuff, but you really learn to appreciate the history of the sports culture there, the Pernell Whitakers or Dwight Stevenson, all the guys that are from there that were good athletes. What was the transition going to a college town? Now, Charlottesville at that time was a southern town, and it felt southern to me. It was completely segregated to me socially. You're an athlete, you might not have felt that way, but coming from Northern Virginia, I remember thinking, I go to a black school because almost all my friends at UVA were black. It was a completely different social environment for me. What was your adjustment coming from Tidewater?
It certainly was a challenge for me, especially my first year, Julie. The entire thing was different, but also I had this athletic side. I had basketball teammates that helped me integrate because I went in with established friends, which are your teammates. But I lived in Tuttle Dorm, right there on the main street. My roommate was Olden Polynice. How about that? OP was my roommate.
OP.
the little guy from Newport News, Virginia, and you got this 6'11", Haitian, but then spent his high school years in New York City, the Bronx. So I want to say, was I carrying his bag or was he carrying my bag? You asked me about myself coming to Charlottesville. How about OP coming to Charlottesville?
Yeah.
But the other classmate was Tom Sheehy. He was McDonald's All-American.
That's right.
And he was from Rochester, New York. So my friends were established quite well because of my team. But in terms of the setting academically, that was challenging. I had to figure out those dynamics. On top of that, practice, games, and the travel. So all of it was a whirlwind for me. I mean, sometimes I didn't know if I slept some night because I had to do the academic piece. You had to get ready for practice. You had games. So it came at me really fast. I met my wife now for over 3 decades, Tracy. She was first year as well. She was a student athlete. She was a member of the track team there. So it was a lot going on. The other thing is, speaking of Tuttle, I had some great dorm mates, and they were non-athletes. So it was myself and Olden, and then another young lady from Newport News was first year also at UVA, Trina Thomas, who's currently the head coach at UNC Greensboro. I believe Trina may be in her 7th or 8th season at UNC Greensboro.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But yeah, Trina previously was the head coach at William & Mary.
Yeah.
She had a head coaching stint at University of Albany in New York, and she was an assistant at Stanford University. So with Trina being there, she became really good friends with Tracy. So after a while, my dorm mates, and those are some young people that a couple of them live in California. They write books. Another young man is in New York. So it was really an experience that I'll never forget, but it helped grow me up. And that was sort of what I feel my parents always were talking about: get ahead, be better, grow. And while basketball was out there, I felt like I had a foundation. And one of my favorite words to this day is balance. Being able to do this, but also do that. Value this and value that. Is one more than the other? Some of it just a level of discipline and maturity that I felt like I was challenged on to be able to do all of those things and some. while keeping it all in perspective. And, I look back on it now after I'm just completing my 35th consecutive season in college athletics, college basketball. And I lean a lot on that foundation and that experience in terms of my journey to where I am today, for sure.
Yeah. Well, what about Terry Holland? What were the expectations that he set for you when he recruited you to go to UVA?
Well, you look at that time, Julian, Ralph had just graduated in the spring of '83. And you had sticks in the back on that front line. I still, to this day, I tell people that don't know better that, Ralph he graduated in the spring of '83. I began there the fall of '83, Julie. So doing my recruiting spiel sometime, I tell people I replaced Ralph Sampson. Okay, how about that? And one time there was a family that didn't know, and the mother actually continued to talk about replacing Ralph. Well, look, I'm 5'10" on a good day, and Ralph's 7'4" plus, and totally different careers for sure. But and coming there, Jim Larranaga was the assistant, Dave Odom was the assistant, Jeff Jones was on the staff. So I mean, you look at some really well experienced and successful college coaches when you say that. Ricky was a senior. Othell Wilson was a senior. Rick Carlisle was a senior. Kenny Johnson was a junior. So those were all older, experienced guards. And when you mentioned earlier about defense, that was the tone. That's what was expected of me in terms of offensively, direct the team, run the team, find the open guys. But certainly if you're left open, you want to have the ability to be able to make the open shot. But it was a game about decisions, but really trying to impact the game on the defensive end. And, when you think about that, you think about Ricky Stokes. That was sort of his role that he played throughout his time at UVA. Othell Wilson was a little bit more balanced in terms of offensively and defensively, but probably followed more in the footsteps of Ricky. And as Ricky and I know, it's a little different having Ralph behind you, protecting that rim versus after he left. But certainly OP and Ken Eatland, and God bless him, who just passed. On that front line, Kenton, who actually was a fantastic walk-on that became a scholarship player and had a great senior year, actually made some key plays that assisted us in playing in the Final Four my first year. But that was it. And, my high school background was about defense in terms of, even though, like I say, I scored, but it was highly emphasized. And throughout my coaching tenure, I always say to people, if you want to be in championship territory, at some point your defense will have to take a stand. And winning was always important to me. And it starts on that side of the ball, on the floor, for sure. So that was kind of that defensive side that came about to me.
Yeah. Well, Terry Holland, he seemed like a Southern gentleman. He was a great guy, tremendous coach. How do you think he would have handled all the changes in college basketball today, with the portal, with the NIL, with the social media, on and on? The basketball is completely different than when Coach Holland was at UVA. You think he would have been able to adjust to today's game?
Well, let me start answering this way, and I may not have been clear earlier as you asked about Coach. Coach Holland helped me get into coaching. He really opened the door for me to get into the profession. After college, I spent a year in retail management. Remember Rose's?
Yeah.
A discount retail store?
Yeah.
I ended up working at Rose's for like 8 months as a manager trainee. And then after 6 months, I went and was transferred to Ocean City, Maryland as an assistant manager. And I wasn't happy. I miss being a part of a team. With those retail hours, I didn't have any free weekends. And then I knew in November of '87, it was Thanksgiving. I had to go to work. I had to leave home, and the Thanksgiving meal was about to be completed, and it was time to eat. I had to leave and go to work. So that was November. Well, by April, I called Coach Holland, and that would have been April of '88, which is 35 years from this month. How about that? And we're actually going to celebrate Coach Fantastic Life in 3 weeks back in Charlottesville.
That'd be great.
I called Coach and said, Coach, I'm not happy. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I miss being around sports. I don't have any free time to go to my high school games. I can't come back to Charlottesville for the weekend. And he said, okay, let me think about it. A week later, Coach Holland called me and said, what do you think about going back to school and maybe helping with the basketball team? I said, well, that would get me around sports again and be a part of basketball. He said, well, the University of Delaware is looking for a graduate assistant. I took a couple of days off and I drove to Newark, Delaware. The head coach was Steve Steinwittle at that time. And I got the job. I got the opportunity. And early May, I resigned at Rose's, and I told them I was going to be leaving in 2 weeks. And how about this, Julie? I left 1 week before the spring season began in May, which is Memorial Day weekend, because they said the place would be jumping at this retail store, and I wanted no part of that. So I was able to leave. Coach Holland recommended that I pursue that opportunity. I go to Delaware. I had a fantastic year. And I really enjoyed it. I was taking graduate school classes along with being a part of the coaching staff. And it took off from there. So I give a lot of credit to Coach Holland. You know, he valued the total package in terms of us as young people. You know, when I think of student athlete, that was what Coach Holland was about. And he showed that in terms of that coach, that after we were done, he still remained in touch with us and assisted us as he did, certainly for me, recommending to be a graduate assistant. And it was important for him to have us all be whole in terms of growing into adulthood. So we've always looked up to Coach. This time will certainly be very different for Coach because he was always, I felt, wanting us to not get too distracted and keep your focus, understanding when and where, certainly have fun, but understand where you are when you're doing it. And I think now there's a lot going on around the young people, and that certainly would be an adjustment for Coach. But again, he wanted what was best for us, and I think he would make that adjustment, as I'm certainly having to do right now in the profession, because you know, I've seen a lot of changes. You know, I started in the '80s, so when I say this, I've touched on 5 different decades of this college coaching space. But Coach said to me, now that I think about it, when I took on the Delaware, he supported and he recommended my name to the University of Delaware. And the one thing he left me with was, when you go there, you make sure that you represent us well. And I felt like that, to me, stamped like I'm a Virginia man and this is how we do it. And now that I've been in the profession 35 years consecutively, I think about him even more with his passing several months, a month ago, that he said represent, but I've also had to represent him because I felt like he put in a good word for me and helped me with this opportunity, which has become a lifestyle for me, which is college coaching.
Yeah, I mean, you've had an unbelievable college career, and I didn't even properly introduce your career. I mean, not only did you work for a coach at UVA for Jeff Jones, who was at UVA. I guess he was helping with the JV team when I was playing a little bit. But you also, yeah, you also coached for Notre Dame, 2 stints with Coach Mike Bray. You've coached with Georgetown with John JT the third, I think we call him. You had 2 stints with Anthony Grant at Dayton. You're the head coach at St. Bonaventure. So you've been, and also did I mention Coach Larranaga at Bowling Green. You've been with some great coaches, with some great players, and you talked about some of the changes that you've seen. What about like a guy like Coach Larranaga? Now I knew him because we used to play pickup ball when I was at UVA. You were there at the early days, and he's 73 and he's still doing it. What did you learn from Coach Larranaga, and what are some of the influences he had on your coaching?
Well, Coach Larranaga, is from New York, and he was a big part of Olden Polynice coming to UVA. Coach Larranaga gave me the opportunity for my first full-time assistant position. I went out there after the 1 year as a grad assistant at Delaware. He took the opportunity to bring me on at 23 to be a full-time assistant at Bowling Green out in the Midwest. But see, Coach L, as we call him now, he was basically my position coach, if you can say. He worked with the guards, and he was really big on being skilled. There was some craftiness that he valued, always wanted us to probe, and he worked on something that I work on a lot with perimeter players in terms of the ability to finish in traffic, around the rim, with the length and size. And he's really evolved. He did a really good job at Bowling Green, and then he goes to George Mason and leads them to a Final Four. And then, as we know, just 2 weeks ago, was back in the Final Four at Miami. So he's really evolved through being a great assistant for Coach Holland and had a major voice and a big impact on the success that UVA had. And then he went to Bowling Green, George Mason, and then Miami. So my hat's off to him. I think he's a great mind. I think he's really evolved and continued to grow with how he sees the game and how it's played. This year, they were a very good offensive-oriented team. He had great guards. I think he really values guard play, but also he values sharing the basketball. And they really were a difficult matchup with the versatility of their guards and perimeter players. And then they had the young man, I think it was Miller, who actually was a transfer from George Mason.
Jordan Miller.
They were really impressive in the challenge to play against. We played them once this year in South Bend, and they were able to defeat us on that afternoon. But no, Coach L has really, I was with him for 3 years. And one thing he left with me, you mentioned all the places I've worked. I always say I'm better for it. But the one thing Coach L said to me that probably allowed me to sustain and maintain in this profession. And certainly there's, in this journey, in this profession, there's been some bumps in the road. Actually, I'm in transition right now. But he said to me, I want my friends to become your friends. And as I mentioned, Coach L's from New York. He's from the Bronx, played at Providence. One of his friends, who was Olden Polynice high school coach, Coach John Carey, became a great friend and confidant of mine as I've journeyed through this profession. But he was talking about building your own network and your relationships to sustain a certain level of success in this profession. And I took that in really to a point where I actually, after 3 years, I left Bowling Green to take on another assistant position in New York. I went to Manhattan College, and the head coach was Fran Fraschilla, who now you see on ESPN all the time and doing some NBA work as well with the draft. I went to New York, and at that time, my thought process was, Coach said, allow my friends to become your friends. Well, we recruited in New York a lot, even though we were at Bowling Green, Ohio, out in the Midwest. And one year we had success recruiting New York. We brought in 4 young men in one class from New York, and multiple different barrels, 3 of the 4 barrels, they came to Bowling Green. And I used to tell them about the importance of seeing green grass. How about that? That was one of my spiels. But I went to Manhattan College, and I was there for 1 year, but I gained such a level of confidence. But I knew at that time I wanted to make a run in this profession of college coaching. And what do they say? And I started it before the song arrived. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And really got comfortable in the city. I got my first driving, I guess it was a warning. You know, at that time they were talking about right on red. Well, here I am. I've driven a car, a Dodge Sundance. I'll never forget it. I drive a Dodge Sundance from Bowling Green to New York, and I'm going to Tallentine High School to recruit. And I'm driving, and I get to a stoplight, and I go right on red. And next thing I look, police sirens are coming behind me to stop me. And I said, look, I'm from Virginia originally. I just moved. Well, I just left Delaware to go to Ohio. I'm telling my story of what I do. And I'm going to Tallentine High School to recruit. I'm a basketball coach in college. And I said, look, I thought I could go right on red. He said, no, not in New York. So he gave me a pass, let me go on. But that's one of my stories. And Coach Larranaga still laughs about that to this day, that I went to his city and I didn't know how to handle my business well at that time.
Yeah. Well, one thing you did, you were a head coach. St. Bonaventure was going through a whole bunch of challenges, and you have a great reputation. You got the job, and you clean things up there, and you got things going the right direction there. When you think about being a head coach, is it a completely different skill set being a successful head coach and being a successful assistant coach? Is it the same if you're a great head assistant coach or you're a great head coach, or are there two different skill sets?
It's 2 different skill sets. You know, once you take that seat and you move over just a few inches, everything that evolves in the program, around the program, it starts with you. So definitely there's a difference. My experience at St. Bonaventure, I always say to this day, I keep it pretty clean and simple. I'm better for it. You know, you mentioned about what I walked in on, but you know, no excuses. Do I desire, again, to be a head coach? Wholeheartedly. When I look at where I'm at in life, been blessed many, many times. But that is a phase that I want to touch again. And failure. I didn't succeed at it, but I do desire to be in that seat again. I love what I do. I love touching on young people. But in the midst of it, as you say, is it different? It's certainly different. That experience to me really taught me also how to be a great assistant coach, associate coach, because you don't do it alone. It takes everyone. And it's the total package, because you can wear yourself out just because you got the title of a head trying to do too much, but you really have to surround yourself with the complete staff, and knowing it starts with the staff. I've always felt that it starts with the staff, because you are the example of what you would desire your team to be. Because it's a game of sharing, give and take. And you want your staff to be that way. And, the opportunity to lead a program, I was there for 4 years. I never forget it. But I've always kept it quite simple that I realized what I walked in on. I understand it even more since I've left, but I'm truly better for it. And, still to this day, seeking those opportunities that I think, a big part of it is finding the right place that fits you. And certainly I keep my eyes and ears open while being focused. Those opportunities come about when you've been around success. I feel like I've been around it, and I enjoy impacting young people. So whether you're in the head seat or the associate seat, which I have been for the last 6 years, impacting the program for success, and certainly starts with impacting young people, and big reason why I got into the profession.
Well, you worked recently for Mike Bray at Notre Dame, and I think you had 2 different stints with Mike Bray, recent as an associate head coach. Mike Bray had a long run at Notre Dame, and it's rare for a coach to stay somewhere 20 years or whatever it was. It was a long time. He got to the Final 8, I believe, twice. You guys had great success together. Recently in the middle of the season, he stepped down. They didn't have a great year this year. But he has expressed that he still wants to coach. Is it tough? Are the pressures on the head coach extraordinary today? Guys like Jay Wright at Villanova, young guy who steps down, young to me at least, who steps down from coaching. Are we asking too much for coaches? Are there too many balls in the air these days?
Well, certainly there's a major change. A lot of people, they can't believe it. I've kind of been attached to Notre Dame. It's actually been 3 stints.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I joined coach here in 2000. I was here from 2000 to 2003. And then I took what I call my 5-year sabbatical. I was away for 5 years. I went to St. Bonaventure. I was there for 4. And then on my first stint at Dayton, and at that time, the head coach at Dayton was Brian Gregory. So after those 5 years away, I returned to Notre Dame, and I was here from 08 to 16. And then that was after the back-to-back Elite Eights, and then the 2015 ACC Championship, which will accomplish our 2nd year in the conference. And then I depart and I go to Georgetown, which you mentioned previously, and that was with JT3, which ended up being his last season at the helm at Georgetown. Then I returned for my 2nd stint at Dayton, and that's when I went to the University of Dayton. And then the head coach was Anthony Grant, who's still there and has done a great job. And, anytime I think about that, you think about the year 2020, the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were undefeated in the A10. We finished that year 29-2. Our last loss was December the 21st in an overtime buzzer beater to Colorado. So was there for 4, and then the pandemic hit, and we never completed that season. We were sitting on a #1 seed for the NCAA tournament. And then, the rest is history. And that's a hard memory for the young people as well as our staff, because, one of my goals is to be coaching on that last weekend. As the first year at UVA, we went to the Final Four in Seattle in '84. So
lost in overtime to Phi Slamma Jamma.
Amen. That's right.
Yeah.
The goal was to keep the score below 50. And how about this, Julian? The final score was 49-48.
Wow, what a game.
I mean, the game plan, Coach Holland, I can remember him talking about the pace and the style that we needed to execute, and it was on. We were right where we needed to be. Just didn't finish it all. But Was at the during that pandemic time at Dayton. And then 2 years ago, Coach called, Coach Bray that is, and we discussed a third stint, which I took on the opportunity and returned as the associate head coach back in June of 21. And last year we returned to the big dance again, and played and ended up in the play-in game after being 15-5 in ACC. I know we got all these different numbers nowadays. I still can't understand it. All I know is 15-5 regular season in ACC. I believe, but hey, we took advantage of it. We took on what was set for us, and we played a overtime great college game. Might have been one of the better games in the NCAA tournament in 22 when we played Rutgers University, and we won in overtime. We got on a plane and we flew that night to San Diego, and within 36 hours, we beat Alabama in the first round, and then we lost the possession game to Texas Tech that to avoid not being able to get to the Sweet 16 that second weekend. But I returned back in 21 because I felt like Notre Dame needed me. As you mentioned, while at Notre Dame, Coach and I, we've had a lot of success. We've won a lot of big games, and some of my greater accomplishments have been while coaching at Notre Dame. And part of the reason I say that, Julian, is one, I feel like some of the former players and the alums have kind of called me I'm an honorary Notre Dame graduate man, because they know once we got in the ACC, they would always talk about UVA and how that is in terms of playing against the alma mater. But when you hear Notre Dame, you think about the Golden Dome and football. Well, I knew who was signing my paycheck, but back in 2000, before I left in 03, we went 3 consecutive years to the NCAA tournament. Notre Dame had not been to the NCAA tournament for a decade. So it became a personal thing to me in terms of, be a winner. How do you impact? How do you find a way at what they wanted to say a football school? Well, here again, I'm dealing with that basketball thing. Well, I coach basketball, and we got to find a way. And we really found a way to be successful. And at that time, we were in the Big East, and we were really good. We went 3 consecutive years in the NCAA tournament, and then that's when I left. I returned in 08, and not that I did it by myself. I'm just talking about my experiences, but it was a collection of all of us doing our part. But then from 08 to 16, we had great rhythm, and we had a flow about us, and we did it on both ends enough to be successful. Because when you think of Notre Dame during that stretch, no one was talking about Notre Dame basketball. We were able to maintain and sustain a certain level of success. When I left in 16, we were coming off of back-to-back Elite Eights, which was, to me, is always one step away from the special weekend of the Final Four. Yeah. And then back in 95 at UVA with Jeff, we were in the Elite Eight. That's right. And one step away. That was with Junior Burrow and all those guys, which we had a great team, Staples and Harold Dean and those guys on the team right there performing at a high level. So, and then I returned last year. So my drive while being here for totaling 13 years, 10 of the 13, I believe, we were a part of the NCAA tournament. And, you would understand this. We won the ACC tournament in 2015. That's a big deal growing up where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And to do it at Notre Dame, sometimes I think I'm not sure they fully have appreciated it out here. That's an accomplishment. And when you think about it, on Friday night in Greensboro, we beat Duke. 24 hours later, we beat North Carolina. And but we had an exceptional team led by Pat Connaughton and Jaron Grant, Demetrius Jackson, and those guys, we knew what we were doing. And at this supposedly football school, we win the ACC tournament. And it's something that when I tell my story, I take much pride in knowing that the success that has been accomplished here, I had a hand in it and feel like I impacted young people's lives for them going forward, as well as touching on a certain level of legacy here with Notre Dame basketball, to be honest with
you. Yeah. Well, Coach, I think I'm stating the obvious here, but I mean, there's nothing that compares to the ACC when you played in the ACC in terms of what the games meant, the intensity of the games, the environment there. I mean, Michael Jordan, all the guys, Sam Perkins. I mean, every team had great players. Tommy Amaker was there, Duke and Johnny Dawkins and all those guys. Is there anything about the conference structure today that's an improvement? I mean, I can't find anything. I mean, the ACC was. I just remember Thursday at 12 o'clock when the ACC tournament would start, how we would get around our TVs wherever we were and watch. But nowadays you don't, as a fan of basketball, you don't treat the conference tournaments like that. I mean, you may watch the semifinals or the finals, or if your team's playing, you may watch a quarterfinal game. But it doesn't mean what it meant when we were in college. Are there anything about the new system that's better than it was back then?
Well, I think the atmosphere of your conference tournament is special.
It's still special.
The atmosphere, when you bring everyone together,
yeah,
it's a special thing. Now, I think each coach, administration, university, sometimes may view it differently. Mm-hmm. But in terms of just getting everyone together, like I say, I'm a little bit old school with it, but I think about the conference in terms of we don't play each other home and away within a season.
I know.
The imbalanced scheduling that way has made it a little bit different, because sometimes you can play one team in February. You've not seen them all year. So you scouting them is a totally different mindset, because they've had to evolve one way or another from November all the way to February. So the system of how we get to Selection Sunday, we got these numbers that I'm not smart enough to figure out all these numbers, how we get to what we get to sometimes.
I don't know.
But all I know is this, at this level, a win is a win.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes that win on the road, regardless of what that opponent's record is, it matters, because there's nothing sweeter than winning on the road.
Yeah.
So, it's a great question. It's changed so much, and you got the numerical numbers in terms of the net and the RPI, and it's definitely changed a lot, because, I don't want to dive into it too much. I try to avoid it. Actually, like during the season, you have different people on your staff. They follow it. I try to stay focused in on, are we getting better? How's this young person doing? How do we improve? Where are we in terms of level of execution, consistency-wise? Because, the numbers sometimes say if you beat this team, it doesn't count as much as if when you play another team that you lost to. So that's why I had to protect my mental space when it came to that.
Yeah.
In terms of how all that evolves. And certainly you get to conference play in the tournament and they say how many games you need to win, but you got to keep focused as best you can. I think the profession as a whole is taking on a totally new landscape, and it evolves. It's evolving by the month right now in a lot of areas, as society is as a whole. But you really have to be, I think, flexible, open-minded. When you've been around it for the time that I have, certainly it's easy to sit around and complain. That's not me. It's all about, I think you got to evolve in this space right now. You got to be thinking, how do I evolve in it? How am I, how flexible am I? And I keep up with it. Evolve or expire. I'm not ready to expire. And, some people say I don't talk about myself a lot. I think I'm good for the college game. It's what I do. Um, you talk about that other side in terms of the NBA. I've always tried to tell young people I don't coach in that space of NBA, but I do watch it and know it enough that my purpose is a lot of times to help you young people strive for what you want to strive for, certainly in life, being a positive for society. But if you want to do that thing called being a pro, that pro is another level. And that's a different mindset that you have to take on. But I enjoy trying to help young people strive to reach their goals. And, this career, this journey, it continues on. And I love it.
Well, Coach, this has been great. Last question for you. How would you advise a young Anthony Solomon today who's at a great school like UVA, Notre Dame? He's first or second year, and he's not playing as much as he may want to play. Nowadays, unlike when you played, you can transfer and you can play right away. You don't miss anything. What would your advice be to a young Anthony Solomon who's working hard and getting good grades at a school, but is not playing as much as maybe they would like to play?
I'm going to go back to my word balance. Keep it in perspective. But you do want to, you want to evaluate it and look at it in its entirety. Beyond the playing time minutes, we all want to play. Hey, my kids, I've had 2 daughters, and now our son's in college, competing for opportunities to play. But I think you need to have a foundation that can really speak some truths to you. You got to really be able to understand exactly what's going on. Patience will always be required. As you were asking the question, Julian, how would you advise them? I'm struggling with, sometimes we have kids in really good situations and they're leaving.
Exactly.
In terms of okay, so that it's just, I'm still, I journal a lot. I like to write. Mm-hmm. I feel like I can express myself. I got notes all the way around me a lot when I'm talking. But just to remind myself from time to time some things, but it's really challenging right now. And that's why I go back to, how do you advise them? The first thing, my parents couldn't help me in this space, even when I was going through it during my time, because the sports, the college side of things was so new to them. So it was foreign. So in terms of young people, who is your support system? I'm going to start there. Who do you trust and who can support you? But part of that support system, Julian, that support system's got to be able to give you some truths. Truths are hard. Easy for people to tell you what you want to hear. But how about the things that you need to hear? So that's my first comment to them. Who's giving you some truths? And the truths are about how you're doing what you're doing in preparation for the opportunities that you desire. Because that's where it starts. Sometimes it does not work out. So you have to make a change. That happens. Now, when you speak about the NIL portal NIL, I combine the two. I say them all the time. I don't just say NIL portal, I say portal NIL, because it's such a dynamic now that's taken over. Everyone knows about the portal. I mean, from fans, supporters, just business people. How about the portal? Then you got this NIL space and all that's going on. I still think at that time, your support system is so important in terms of how are you thinking about those two? How are we going to operate in that space of portal and NIL? Because it can become a distraction. And remember, early on, you mentioned about, my level of maturity from my high school coach to Coach Holland, I thought they handled themselves that way, because where I'm going with it is the portal, it can become a distraction. Okay. There's opportunities that I love it. Young people now being able to receive from their NIL space and awareness, and there's some value in that. But keeping that in perspective in terms of opportunities that you said on the academic side as well as the sports side, because there's more responsibilities that have been thrown on their plate with the NIL side, which can take away from you striving for that pro area. So now you got to handle that, and you got to keep getting better. You got to improve. I say improve development a lot, but some days when I'm reflecting on my day, I wonder sometimes, how are we receiving that advice when someone says improve, develop, get better, keep going? You don't want that to be taken away because you got all these other opportunities out there as well. Because the one thing you probably said coming in was, I want to strive to be the best I can in my particular sport. So it takes a lot of support, guidance for these young people, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And, with where I'm at in this profession, I try to lend some advice to all of them. I think I try to lend a hand to other coaches that are trying to make this as a lifestyle in terms of this profession as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you do offer a kind word to everyone you see. One of my best friends is Jason Coleman. His son is Gibraltar Coleman, and Jason just ran into you at the Final Four, and you took time to talk to him, ask about his son. And this is a kid you didn't recruit, but you made him feel special, and that's why you've been so successful. It is amazing. Anyone who knew you at the time, and I haven't talked to you, Coach, in 40 years, or probably 35 years or so, but no one who knew you then is surprised that you're so successful, because you always carried yourself like the success was on the way. And so, I couldn't be happier for all the things you accomplished. I know you'll get that head job and another. I'm sure you and Coach Bray, maybe you'll be together in another stint as well. So I just wish you the best of luck, and a really great to see you, and I'm glad you took time to talk to me.
No, my pleasure, Julian, and keep this up. We're at that time now that we enjoy reflecting on our past. Now, sometimes as we get to talking, we enlarge our stories of success. I get it, but no, this is great. I keep up with what you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing, because I think it's needed, and it's a great thing, because what it's doing is connecting us to people that maybe we hadn't communicated with for decades at a time. And it's great to share, and hopefully this can be very meaningful for some of the young people that keep up with all that you're doing as well. So go Hoos, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, Coach, thanks for those kind words. I enjoy it. I mean, it's great seeing people that were around during those development years. Like, I used to see you when I loved playing basketball. I wasn't a Division I player, but I used to love competing against you, and I used to watch how you carried yourself on the UVA team, and I would love to be in your shoes. So, but it's great to reconnect, with the guy that I admired so much many years ago, and continue to. So, so again, coaches. Oh, of course, man. So, well, look, thanks for the time. If you're ever in the DC area, because I'm sure you will be recruiting, make sure you let me know next time. Let's get a coffee or a beer, whatever you like to drink.
Well, I will keep that in mind. Matter of fact, we have a daughter who's in PA school at the University of Maryland.
Okay,
and,
yeah.
I will let you know what our calendar looks like, because next week, Maryland's medical school is actually in Baltimore.
Okay, yeah.
And she's got her 1 year half. It's the white coat. It's the short coat ceremony for PA school. So like in the medical school, it's a totally different world for me. So I'm trying to get it together, but very proud of her. So we'll be spending some time there over the next week, but I'll let you know. Okay.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. And I look forward to seeing you.
All right, same here. Thank you.
Okay, Slow. Take care,
Bye.
Coach. All right, man.
Good evening. Bye.